Good evening, my fellow exorcists, and welcome to the lair of Filmaru. Tonight, I will be reviewing Star Wars Empire at War and its sequel, Forces of Corruption. Command or corrupt an entire galaxy in the definitive Star Wars strategy collection. It is a time of galactic civil war. Will you take up the reins of the Republic, assume control of the Empire, or rule the Star Wars underworld? Let me be clear, this is one of my most visited Star Wars games, whether it's to play the base games or it's to play the mods like Thrawn's Revenge, Fall of the Republic, the lesser-known Mandalorian Wars mods, the Clone Wars mods. This is the one game I constantly come back to, and now more so because of the mod called Age of Legends, which goes through the extended universe of Star Wars, where you play right after the Battle of Endor and go into like the rise of Cade Skywalker, the rise of the Yuuzhan Vong, the rise of the New Jedi Order, the Tales of the New Republic, and the Dark Empire Rising. Yeah, this game has a really deep part in my heart. Like, I've been playing it for years. I got it. It was one of the first Star Wars games that I played on PC, and it's just an amazing game, and I'm still surprised that I'm playing it even today, since it came out in 2005 and 2006, and I actually remember getting it from Walmart, and booting it up, playing the tutorials, and then playing the campaigns, which, albeit were pretty easy, except for a few missions, like the Han Solo and Chewbacca mission on Corito, where you have to go steal information and then hijack an AT-AT, and then pretty much you're sneaking around an Imperial base, trying not to die with just 2 units. Where the Empire had a very similar mission where you had to try and capture the Tantive 4 over Tatooine using a Star Destroyer after you've hidden everything, and you have to try and get your Star Destroyer to the Tantive 4 quick enough, or you need to place it perfectly, so it's a lot easier to capture it with the tractor beam. I also remember the Forces of Corruption, the DLC or sequel to this game, actually had a very similar mission where you had to fight through Dathomir just to save all the witches and get their Rancors back to them. And it was just really hard because, like the Han Solo and Chewbacca missions, you had to sneak around the base and try and steal units or cloak yourself and try and run the mission with only two units, which these 3 missions were like later on in the game, and it was the much needed hard level for the missions. The rest of it was pretty easy. Most of the planets you could literally just take with a giant force of either Star Destroyers and the smaller ships like the Tartarn class, or for the Rebels, you just take a bunch of Y-Wings, a few MC-80s, and the Home 1, and you can just get through it pretty easily. Where with the Zahn Consortium, you talk about the Death Star and the Death Star 2 and Starkiller base being overpowered. Try fighting with Zahn's Aggressor class cruiser, and then tell me that it's not overpowered. Like, this ship alone has a massive ion cannon, and then super laser, or mass driver cannon, and using that's all you need to take out a Star Destroyer or any big ship or the enemy base itself, because that was one overpowered ship. But also you've got the Vengeance class, which, let's be honest, is not my favorite cruiser in this, because it could go down pretty easily, and it's mainly a suicide unit where you can use it to blow up other units around it with its self-destruct. There's also the Marauder class, the Star Vipers, the Skip Ray, Blast Boat. That's just to name a few of the units of the Zon Consortium. For the Empire and the Republic, the Rebellion, you have the ships you know pretty well. Except for a few added, like the Tartard class cruiser. You've got your corvettes, you've got your cruisers, you've got obviously your capital ships, like I said, the MC-80. You also have the Nebulon class cruiser throughout it. And for the Empire, you've got pretty much the same thing, but it's more capital ship focused with the Acclimators and the Victory class cruisers and the obviously the Star Destroyer. I'm pulling up a list of the that one ship that I can't remember. It's an Alliance Assault Frigate Mark II, and like I said, it's not really my favorite ship for the Rebels, because it can honestly be a moving target half the time, but it's also the closest thing you'll come to a really good frigate next to the Nebulon B. You also have your hero characters. Forces of Corruption, we have Wedge Antilles. You could play Luke. You have the Millennium Falcon throughout the game. You've got Admiral Akbar and the Home One. You've got Captain Ramus Antilles using the Sundered Heart. And like I said, you have Red Squadron, who is really good if you use it against like certain ships where they can do a trench run on it. And for the Empire, we have, the Emperor, Darth Vader, you've got Boba Fett, you've got General Veers, and you've got Admiral Piet, who uses a Star Destroyer. And then their most prominent and hard to get unit, which you can only get like after an achievement in the Galactic Conquest game mode, and in the campaign you don't get it until the very end of the campaign, but you do get to use the Death Star, which can destroy planets and essentially can't be beat unless your entire fleet is destroyed. Then you lose the Death Star, which makes Death Star one of the most overpowered units in the game, which is why you don't get it until the end of the campaign or the end of the conquest. And you don't get to use it anywhere in the scrimmage mode, which a lot of people, I'm pretty sure, played. Like, it was the first thing I touched during the Empire, my very first playthrough of Empire at War, because you had to figure out what the units were before you do anything. You had to, it just gave you an idea of how to play the game and what real warfare was going to be in the game. Where the campaign does teach you the units, it also puts you right into the story, gives you a bit of a tutorial, tells you how to use the units, and it gives you a really good story. Like, for Empire at War, the story is you're playing both the Empire or the Rebellion, depending on which campaign you use, and you can use them. You can play however the hell you want. Like, you could use only certain units, or you can play like the Rebels, or you can create a huge force just to destroy your targets with one fell swoop. The only problem is the unit count in these missions. Like, for the base game, it's only like 18 units in space, 10 units on the ground, and I believe it's the same for Forces of Corruption. The only difference is in like the modded games, you have a lot more units and you have a better chance of having bigger battles, where the original games, they just relegated you to a few ships and you couldn't really do much because of that. Like, the unit count was so small, and that's one of the things I always hated. Like, sometimes you can just, it feels like a Star Wars game, but you couldn't really add as many units as you wanted. Like, you can't add like 5 Star Destroyers just to go to, and like 2 Victory classes and 4 Acclimator classes without worrying about hitting the cap before you can add most of your units, which was always a huge problem in this game. It's still a really good strategy game, it's just, you also kind of wish you could just overpower your enemy with non-stop. Where here you can't really do it with the restrictions. I mean, unless you play one of the mods where they definitely raise the unit count, and they look a lot better with these massive capital ships. Like, you're building your own army, and you can actually see that army on those mods. As I was saying with the story, for the Empire, you're trying to build the Death Star, you're gathering all these slaves, whether you're going after the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, going after the Geonosians on Geonosis, and you're also hunting down this pirate who stole a Star Destroyer. You're watching as General Veers pilots the very first AT-AT Walker on Karita, and you're watching as the Empire slowly upgrades their forces from Acclimators and Tartar class cruisers to the Star Destroyers and Death Stars and AT-ATs, where for the Rebels, you're pretty much trying to find out what the Empire is building. You're trying to find the plans for it. You're going to Wayland to gain X-Wings. You're using C-3PO and R2 to capture new plans for new units, which is a heavily used thing in these games. You gotta use R2-D2 and C-3PO if you want to advance your technology, and they do have like a tutorial on how to do that in the game. You also get to play as C-3PO and R2-D2 sometimes, taking over turrets. Pretty much they're like repair units, kind of. And they're mainly there to steal the plans for each unit you want to use. And pretty much the story is you're trying to stop the Death Star, and you're really just playing what happens before Episode 4 for both the Empire and both the Republic. And it's actually pretty cool to see that side of the story. Like, the most we got of that when these games were coming out was like, I think closest thing I can remember is the Kyle Katarn storyline and the Dash Rendar stories, plus the Rogue Squadron games, and the Star Wars Galactic Battleground games. So this was a huge eye-opener to the game, to the lore, where we got a lot more based on the story of what happened between 3 and 4. Forces of Corruption, you're playing as the Zon Consortium, essentially playing the story in between 5 and 6, and then 6 and the rest of the EU, where you're playing as Tiber Zahn and Yuri Fane and IG-88, Searly, whatever the hell her name is, and Bosk, trying to fight against Prince Seizure and the Black Sun, Jabba the Hutt, the Empire and the Republic, trying to gain knowledge, gain credits, corrupt so many planets in this game. Like, that is the newest ability in this game, where with this new faction you can corrupt planets, you can gain new units specific to that planet, like you can gain Gungans, you can gain these Ewok Tamers, Rancors, No-Gree Soldiers. It was just so fun gaining all these new units every time you'd corrupt a planet. Well, some of the planets. It also could net you more credits. You could play these little campaigns on each planet with certain characters. It was just so fun. And just pretty much you're going up against other criminal organizations, plus the Empire, plus the Rebellion. After you free Tiber Zahn from Kessel, and after you gain the Sift artifact that you stole from Jabba the Hutt, you're stealing Tabana gas from Bespin, you're meeting Grand Admiral Thrawn to sell the holocron, and he betrays you. And pretty much this entire story is to find out what the Sith holocron is for, and it all leads up to stealing the Emperor's new capital ship that we see in the Reborn Empire storyline in the books, and you sadly only get to use this capital ship, the Eclipse, during one game near the end, and you never see it again in either the Galactic Conquest mode or the Scrimmage, because that ship is massive. The only time you can actually get to play it is if you were to download Thrawn's Revenge or the Age of Legends mods that I was talking about, because it is heavily prominent in those games, and it's just as overpowered as it was in this campaign. If I can find my phone, I'd like to give you guys the list of the units that I really did not care for in this game, because half the time you really didn't bother using them, or if you did, some of them were just so weak or so useless. And starting with the Empire ships, I would say the broadside cruiser, because it's a missile boat, but the main problem is, it's a missile cruiser, and it's mainly there to use against certain starfighters, or sometimes you could use it against an enemy base, but it's got to be far away, and it's like it goes down way too easily and can be destroyed easily. The TIE Scout Squadron, which I really don't know why it's in there. I think the main thing about it is you can use it to see where your enemy is, and that's about it. That's its main thing, which doesn't really work with the Star Destroyers, when you could just use those to take on the enemy head on. For the land units for the Empire, the TIE Mauler, honestly my least favorite of all the units. I mean, yeah, it's fun watching it drive over rebel soldiers, crushing them, running them over, because who doesn't want to do that? But the main thing about it is, again, it's like the TIE Scout. It's weak as hell, and I guess the best thing about it is it's a suicide unit similar to the Vengeance that I mentioned for the Zon Consortium, where it's got a self-destruct mode, and that's about it. There's also the SPMAT, which there's another unit for the Rebels called the MPTL-2A, which these two are just artillery units that you have to use from afar. They're essentially the ground version of the broadside cruiser and the marauder cruiser, which you're shooting them from far away, but also they have a limited range, and they can easily be taken down by infantry or smaller walkers. So I barely use them. And the scout troopers, which they're pretty much scout troopers on speeder bikes, and like I said, these are fragile as hell. Like, they you send them out and anyone can take them out. They're pretty much suicide units that die way too easily. Then the special thing, I guess, is they can let off mines that you can't really use, because by the time you get to the enemy, your speeder's already destroyed, and you've just got the infantry unit that was on the speeder that instantly dies. So, useless. For the rebel ships, we've got the Z-95 Headhunter and the A-Wing, and the Marauder Cruiser. For the Z-95 and the A-Wing, they're... I guess I didn't really use them because the A-Wing is very similar to the TIE Scout, except instead of using the area scanner, I think they just deflect missiles. Honestly, I can't remember. Most of the time you're going to be using Y-Wings or B-Wings or X-Wings throughout this. So the Z-95 and the A-Wing kind of are a bit useless half the time. And the Marauder Cruiser, I already got into that. Now the Rebel Infiltrator and the Gallifrey HTT, Rebel Infiltrator is supposed to be very similar to the Scout Trooper, except it's pretty much just an infantry trooper with the bombing ability that the Scout Trooper uses. And I guess it's got a heavier gun, but like the Scout Trooper, it dies way too easily. So I never really built these as much. And the Gallifrey HTT, it's supposed to be like a troop transport, but I mean, there really wasn't much use for it because it just transports your troops through the plants of Felucia that are very dangerous, and that's about it. There's not really that many guns on it. It's weak as hell. Now, for the Zon Consortium, I didn't really have any problems with any of the space units. They're actually pretty fun to use and pretty cool and very useful. But for the Zon Consortium landing units, we have the MDU Company, which essentially it's a mobile building pad, which, again, another awesome feature in this game that you can use it for back-to-tanks, turrets, ship repair stations, the Destroyer Droid Mach 2, which is essentially a droideka in this game. Not my favorite unit because while you can switch it between rockets and blaster bolts, it goes down way too easily, whether it's in this game or the Fall of the Republic mod done by the same creators as Thrawn's Revenge. And the thing is, the shields really don't do much, and this unit is just weak as hell against infantry. And finally, the F9TZ Cloaking Transport, which essentially is the same thing as the Gallo Free HTT, but it's got a cloaking device, and that's about it. So, yeah, those are my least favorite units of this game, and essentially, they're useless to me. Like, half the time I'm using AT-ATs or AT-STs or Stormtroopers instead of those, or I'm using the T2B and T4B units for the Rebels, plus the Plex Troopers and the normal Rebel Infantry or Snow Speeders. Which I love the little effect where the Snow Speeders can actually use their tow cables to defeat the AT-ATs in these games, which was a really cool idea. I mean, there's also the Lancer classes for the Empire, which essentially is the Empire's answer to the Snow Speeders as an air unit. There's also the heroes Yoda and Garmbel Iblis in the Forces of Corruption game, where Garmbel Iblis pilots this giant fortress that you can use against the Empire or the Zon Consortium, and it is one of my favorite units in that game. And I already talked about the space units, but yeah, this is a really good game. Like I said, there are some useless units that you will rarely use, and then there's the lack of units that you can use in certain missions because of how small the maps are, or how small the unit count is for most of the games. Since these games were like for the Windows Vista or the Windows 95, you didn't have that much in the download size, which is forgiven. But this is why we need an Empire at War 2 or a remake of the Empire at War games, because they were awesome when they came out. Like, this was a real-time strategy game that knew what it was doing, had an amazing campaign, had awesome units that really had the rock, paper, scissors ideal down. Like, for a Tartan class that was good against starfighters, but it was horrible against capital ships, where you had the Y-Wings or the TIE bombers, which were an answer to the capital ships with how many units you could use against them. The AT-AT were awesome and just really hard to beat in these games because they were just so powerful unless you had the Snow Speeders. These games were just so awesome when they came out, and again, I constantly find myself coming back to them, whether it's out of boredom or I just want to relive memories of taking out capital ships and conquering these awesomely made planets. Honestly, no planet is the same in these games, and that is amazing. And I definitely remember when I was playing this as a kid, I saw the trailers for the Clone Wars mods, and I constantly tried hunting them down. It took me a while, and I love those games just as much, watching clone troopers fight against droids. And it's the one thing that saddens me that this game never got a prequel or a sequel, because they could have done so much with clones, or the First Order and the Resistance, or the units from the Old Republic, which is why I am so glad we have the modding community and we have all these amazing mods that we can use. And honestly, I definitely gotta thank both studios that made this game possible, because without them, I wouldn't have had such a great childhood playing this game. And those studios are Petroglyph Studios, who has many times expressed the desire to create more Empire at War games. They've pointed it out to Disney, and we're still waiting until the license that EA has expires next year, so hopefully we will get a chance to see another Petroglyph game for Empire at War. Yeah, I'm definitely giving this a 8.5 for being an amazing game, but also the I hate the unit count, because obviously that makes the game a lot harder to just have these massive battles that you're hoping for, unless you download a mod that gets rid of the unit cap or raises it. And the very useless units that they put into this game that essentially feel like placeholders for better units, or they feel like they're just there to add certain units from the movies and the books. But yeah, I love these games, and I really hope we get to see another one in the future. Because, I mean, again, who doesn't want to see the Clone Wars in this form, or the Second Galactic Civil War between the First Order and the Resistance? I mean, come on, Disney, make it happen. Give Petroglyph a chance. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the little notification bell for more of our content. And have a great night, guys. And may the Force be with you always.